Welcome to episode 3 of the Threading History podcast. In our first episode, we discussed natural law and partisanship. In our second episode, we discussed the crossing of the Rubicon. And today we want to discuss crossroads in the nation today. It would likely be helpful for you to go back and listen to those first 2 episodes to give you more context and information to help you understand the information we'll be discussing today.
In today's episode, we're going to start with Lincoln's Lyceum address, where he warns the American people about rising divisions and tensions amongst the people. Lincoln says, "At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? By what means shall we fortify against it? Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush us at a blow? Never! All the armies of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, with all the treasure of the earth in their military chest, with the Bonaparte of a commander, could not by force take a drink from the Ohio, or make a track on the Blue Ridge in a trial of 1,000 years. Essentially, Lincoln saying, hey, we cannot be attacked from without. But he goes on and he says, at what point then is the approach of danger to be expected? I answer, if it has ever reached us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of freemen, we must live through all time or die by suicide." This is such a powerful quote. But what does it mean?
Yeah, it's very powerful. You look at it and you can see parallels of today, right? He's talking a lot of how the destruction of our nation is not going to come from without. It's not going to become war from these other nations stepping on our soil. It's not going to be bombs, missiles, whatever. It's this destruction of our culture from within, the attack from within.
Isn't he such an eloquent speaker? I mean, look at this. For a commander could not by force take a drink from the Ohio or make a track on the Blue Ridge.
It's such beautiful verbiage, isn't it?
Not in 1,000 years. At what point then is the approach of danger to be expected? So he goes on and he says what? Where are we going to find that danger?
Right. He's saying, like, in a way, we are impenetrable. We are this great nation, this great foundation, but it will come from within.
And that's where he says, if destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author. We'll be its author. Nobody from the outside can touch us, but we from within will be its author and finisher. As a nation of freemen, we must live through all time or die by suicide.
I think it's just the repetition of that fact, right? The downfall of this people will come by the hand of this people.
What are some of the ways you think we are destroying ourselves from within?
I think there's a handful of ways. Partisanship, right? It's all about taking a side, even though you don't fully understand what that side stands for. There's an ignorance that leads to hatred, right? Hatred of one side to the other, or a hatred of the foundation because of your misunderstanding of it. I would also say your entitlement, feeling like you deserve or you're owed more than in reality you are. And that's just to name a few. What are your thoughts?
Wow, I think we could go on and on. My thoughts remind me of a joke. The joke goes like this. The devil is standing outside of a church, and he's standing outside the church crying. Just crying so hard. And somebody comes up to them and they said, "Why are you crying?" And the devil says, "Because everybody blames me for everything." What I like about this is human nature wants something to blame. We have to blame something for our problems. Because if we don't do that, then we have to say, whoa, what if the problem is me?
Right, we're always trying to deflect. It's so natural. It's so natural to just say, it was someone else, or it was something else.
Looking at a little kid who gets in trouble, it starts early. The first thing that when you accuse him of doing something, or you watch him doing something, that little kid will look at you and say, it wasn't me, it was Tommy. It's just so natural from such a young age, and it sticks with us forever.
Right.
Blaming is such a big part of the society we live in, and I think will continue to be a big part of the society we live in. And even as we're destroying ourselves from within, And even after this destruction is complete, can you not see both parties looking at each other and saying, well, you were the problem, and the other party saying, no, 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 you were the problem? And it never changes. That's what we see right now today is this political jargon of the blame game. It's my side or your side, and it will continue to be so down the road.
Well, I think we made it so easy to play the blame game. We've given ourselves these parties that we can point at, say it's all your fault, you caused this, you corrupted this, and we never, as an individual, which is the most important part, take a step back and look within to say, this is the part I played in this.
I think that's what's so difficult, but that's what makes a person of character or integrity is one who can squarely look at you in the face and say, yes, I did that, or yes, that was my problem. What do I need to do to fix it? And that's a hard thing to do.
Oh, it takes a ton of strength, and it's painful to do.
But that's the answer, is for each individual to say, how am I the problem?
And I think that takes stepping out of the box of your beliefs, your partisanship, your party, your religion, whatever it is, taking a step back, and instead of throwing the blame on others, you break this box and you delve deep. And it's painful, it's hard, but it does create this beautiful character in you.
Let's try to find the answer of how we got here to this place of blame. And let's also look at maybe we can find some solutions. But to do that, I think we need to go through the threads of history to look at some ideas. And today, let's look at Epicurus. Epicurus, he was a Greek philosopher, and he came after Plato, and he's best remembered for making pleasure humanity's highest good. So to Epicurus, this was freedom of disturbance in one's life. He wanted to take away all the bad. If there's something bad happening to you, just walk away or get rid of it in your life. And he looked at two things that really disturb man the most. And the first thing that disturbed man the most that we have to get rid of is looking up in the heavens, right? Looking up in the sky and seeing lightning and thunder and falling stars, comets or eclipses, and see all these things within nature and say, oh my gosh, this is God talking to us in some way? But then part of that disturbance is famine and nature trying to destroy man. Or we can look at things such as earthquakes and hurricanes and saying God's trying to punish us in some way or another. And so Epicurus says, so why don't we do this? Let's say that God has no interest in man whatsoever. He doesn't look down on us and try to get into our affairs, but it's just us. And that's a good feeling because then we don't have that pain of, oh, God is going to strike me down at any moment because I've been so bad or I've done such a bad thing. So he wants to take away, he wants man to stop looking at the pleasures and the displeasures of God upon mankind. The second disturbance is that there's an afterlife. Because if there's an afterlife, then man is continually thinking, I'm going to go to hell. So we have to escape the first disturbance in this life by saying the gods aren't involved, but then we have to look at the second disturbance and say, God doesn't have any hold on us in the next life. So we don't have to constantly be afraid of our actions during this lifetime. Who would want to live a life in Hades anyway? That sounds miserable, the way the Greeks described it.
It does sound miserable.
I mean, this endless torturing and...
Yeah, it'd be awful. So it sounds to me, in essence, he's just trying to get people to experience the now. Let go. Stop being so scared. Live your life.
In essence, that's kind of his thought. But he gets a bad rap. I feel bad for the guy because today it's more when people look at Epicureanism, they look at this idea that somebody who finds themselves in that ideology is one who is very fond of luxury or follows after sensual pleasure. And that's not how he was at all. I mean, the guy lived in a commune and was talking about peace and and also talking about how to not find excessives in your desires.
Finding a moderation and a balance.
It was all, essentially he says, hey, this ice cream will make you really, really happy, but don't do it in excess, because then you're going to be miserable. Like, it's going to be terrible
You'll
after
get
a while.
sick, you'll gain weight.
After your fourth carton, you're just like, I thought this would make me so happy. So he gets a bad rap because what happened is Epicureanism became synonymous with hedonism. Mm. Hedonism is eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And this has gone, it is finding pleasure and applying that into your life. Like, man is to go out and find pleasure all day long. That's essentially his hedonism, and to take himself away from pain. Sounds a lot like Epicureanism, and so you can see over time how Epicureanism became aligned with this line of thought as well.
Seems like it would have taken a lot of subtle shifts where they slowly blended and became one, right? Because it began with this healthy moderation of enjoy your pleasures, but don't go overboard. Enjoy your life. Don't be afraid. Move forward. And it's become this seek nothing but gain, nothing but materials, nothing but pleasure, right?
Over time, it becomes they're all a bunch of atheists. They don't believe in God because gods are just going to ruin their lives. And so they take God out of it. It becomes all about pleasure and not refraining from excessive pleasure. It becomes very materialistic.
It almost seems like there's an aspect of not taking responsibility for your actions or not worrying about the consequences of your actions, right? It's to go overboard with these pleasures, with these materials.
Here's an example. So hedonism has been around forever, since the ancients. And this is from a quote from Gilgamesh. Fill your belly day and night. Let days be full of joy. Dance and make music. These things alone are the concern of men. It's always seeking to what makes me feel good.
Seems like an empty life, right? You're trying to fill this void in you with materials.
How do you see that ties in with us today in America?
I think we as Americans have made an entirely temporal shift. We are so focused on the nicest cars, the nicest things, what's owed to us, right? It's this temporal shift of getting into the nicest homes, where will we make the most money? And there hasn't been much of a balance in the other aspects of our lives. So what it seems like is we can in essence say that our nation had its own Epicureanistic foundation that shifted into a hedonistic one.
So Greece wasn't founded on Epicureanism, and America wasn't founded upon Epicureanism. But what happens over time is these ideas keep on permeating throughout the culture. And it starts leading towards these materialistic ideas of, I need more, gain, money, I need more things.
Right. So it seems like our foundation of life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness is turned over to lots and lots of property as our focus.
As much property in the symbolism of whatever we can get.
Right.
The problem with hedonism is it becomes very one-dimensional.
Right, and we are not meant to be one-dimensional beings. We're meant to have a fine balance of all aspects of life.
Well, let's look at these different aspects, and you can find this in many different cultures who practice this and look at this as a person who is discovering balance in their life, and they break the person into 4 parts. The first part is spiritual, and that would be your praying, meditation, your connection with God. Can you think of anything else that would be?
I think that covers a big part of it, learning to be able to feel the spirit, how to nourish your soul. I think it all goes kind of into that same cube.
Yeah, and when you're feeding your spirit, I think it opens up the door for these other 3 areas to maintain this balance in your life. Mm-hmm. When the spiritual body and the spiritual soul is good, then I think you can really move forward and discover your true being, your true self.
Your purpose.
The second one would be your mental body.
Mm-hmm. I think this would involve your intellectual studies, your books you're reading, podcasts you're listening to. It's nourishing the brain, stimulating the brain, doing those activities that would make you more wise.
It's learning those things to help you become a better person.
Mm-hmm.
It's learning those things that help you understand the past. It's learning those things to help you understand the future. But man is always an important part of man has always been this idea of reason. Mm-hmm. We have the ability of reason, and with this ability of reason, we can think things out. Mm-hmm. We're not like an animal who is constantly in a state of looking for its constant pleasures. This is what sets us apart, is our ability to reason, think things out.
Yeah, and nor are we machines that when one set of information is input, we have one output, right? We've been given this beautiful gift to discern for ourselves.
And the third section is your emotional being.
Mm.
It's coming to this place of, your emotional is coming to a place of what? What does emotional help you do?
Well, I think it's becoming emotionally strong, right? Not letting things get to you, being able to control your emotions in the sense that not everything sets you over the top. You can handle strife and stress in your life. You always know, you keep your zen, right? I think that's a big part of this emotional state, this emotional nourishment.
Well, this is what should be separating adults from children.
Right, the emotional strength.
Being able to control your emotions and not react with every little wrong thing that happens in your life, but being able to act upon things and being able to go back to reason and being able to maintain that emotion in your life.
Yeah, it's not sweating the small stuff. And not only is it not sweating the small stuff, to be emotionally strong is also to learn to say the things that are hard to say, right? Whether that's giving a compliment, whether that's giving praise, it's also being able to say where you're wrong. It's a wide array of things, but it's a beautiful skill and gift to have.
Well, that emotion connects us with other people too.
Right.
For better or for worse.
Right.
You walk in a room and you can really feel the emotion behind a person and where they're at. Mm-hmm. But emotion is a very important part of our social outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Being able to sense where another person's at and being able to reconcile with where you're at.
And the last is physical. Physical would be exercising.
Yeah, things you eat.
It would be taking care of your body the best you can. It would be
getting enough rest.
And all these things, they help bring us to a state of balance, which is very opposite of the hedonistic way. Mm-hmm. It's very opposite of the materialistic or the I want, I need. It takes us to a place where we can be happy with different areas in our life and be content and find that contentment when we're in this perfect balance in our lives. It was described to me once as a car with one flat tire. If we are out of balance in our lives and we are driving, or if our car has one flat tire and we're trying to drive down the road, that car is not going to go so well.
I mean, you might make it to your destination, but it's going to be a rough drag, right?
Well, what we're looking at today is this materialism, how has it totally consumed our lives. We got 3 flat tires, most of us.
Yeah, we're driving on one wheel.
That's not even getting us to our destination.
No.
It's not really getting us anywhere. In fact, it causes us to go create this circular pattern within our lives that all goes back to one thing. If I need something else to make me happy.
Right.
It's never from within, it's always from without.
Right.
And if we look from without for something to make us happy, and we can never find that contentment from within, we'll never find joy in our lives.
Yeah, this is a recipe for a lot of anguish in your life, a lot of unfulfillment, and I think that's the beauty of these 4 parts, is that they're this interlocking culmination of a person who is whole, a person who can find their purpose.
Do you think happiness and joy are different, those 2 words?
That's a good question. I have no clue as far as like the definition of the 2, but I would say yes, in the sense of joy feels like this more fulfilled, everlasting completion, right? And this happiness can be fleeting. It can be from time to time. It's these little tastes of what joy may be.
That's the way I see things, is when we do bring this balance into our lives, we are finally bringing our life into the state of joy.
A deep contentment. I like how you said that before. It brings this contentment.
And I think that helps put us on our path because we're able to start looking at things from different perspectives when we're balanced in our lives. We as individuals have become so unbalanced.
As a nation, even.
As a nation, we have become so unbalanced as well. And Rome, they adopted the philosophy of Epicureanism. And it probably hit its height right at the end of the Roman Republic. But it had a counterpart to it, which was Stoicism. Stoicism, if you look at it, was almost the complete opposite of Epicureanism. The Stoics, they believed in duty, this idea of self-sacrifice for the common good. With Stoicism, it was about controlling your desires and your pleasures, and not being afraid of pain. Also, they wanted to use one's mind instead of getting caught up in one's emotions and feelings. It was about reason. And you had these two parties that just split right in half at the end of the Republic. The two parties were the Stoics and the Epicureans, and it created a culture war of sorts. It was so back and forth, so partisan, that it created this dynamic of almost a brewing emotional civil war.
So it was a division between the Stoics and the Epicureans?
Yeah, it totally split the people in half. You had Rome, you had the one side who was looking at this idea of pleasure, constant pleasure, and then you had the other side, we must refrain from that, and these two sides were in battle with each other. Kind of like what's happening today.
Yeah, it's totally like what's happening today.
And I love how we can see the threads, how this was happening right up to the end of the Republic.
What does that mean for us today?
So even though it wasn't these two sides having an all-out war that destroyed the Republic, it was the cultural battle that was happening on both sides.
It was the dissension and the division of the nation in its entirety.
I'm sure everybody had their signs out during that time as well, what party they're going for, right?
Cast their voice.
And I think you can probably point out that both sides were at fault. You could blame both sides for some of the disintegrating problems that were happening.
Do you even think toward the very end of the Republic that either side really acknowledged their part in it, or did they kind of go down saying it was your fault?
No, I don't think there was any acknowledgement in either side, because we're seeing it play out today as well. No side will acknowledge that they're at fault, because if you're part of that side, you're on the winning side. What that does, though, is it starts planting these seeds of destruction within the society at whole, because you can no longer find that common ground. Common ground has always been such an important part, as we've talked about in past episodes. You have to find that compromise, because a republic is always going to split. You're always going to have splits. But once you get to that place where you can no longer find that common ground, then you know your republic's in trouble.
Right. We can see that today, that it's as though the left side, the right side, whatever they may be, doesn't understand one another. There's no common ground. There's no we can agree on this part or that. It's entirely one side or the other is at fault according to the other.
And what we can see from the past, I mean, we've looked at Lincoln talking to this split nation that ultimately had to go to war against each other because they could never find that compromise. Likewise, you have the Romans who eventually they lost their freedoms and went from a republic to an empire. It's a really sad state in a nation when you can't find compromise. And we'll see that it's the beginning of the stages of the downfall of that said country. We're coming to this crossroads. To you, what does the word crossroads mean?
So in my mind, I kind of imagine to go back to our last episode, the crossing of the Rubicon. We're there, we've got this choice in front of us, and it's deciding, do we take this step of no return? Because once we do, there's no going back. It's going to be this very important decision. I also wanted to look up crossroads because I think it says it in the definition more beautifully than I could. And this is what it says. It says, a crossroads is a point at which a crucial decision must be made that will have far-reaching consequences.
And that's crossing the Rubicon. Once you make this big decision, you can't go back. There is no going back to where we were. Every nation that has ever existed has had a crossroads where it changes fundamentally the direction of that nation. We've talked a lot about crossroads, this word crossroads, in the first 2 episodes and now in the third one. We need to look at what are some of the events that takes us to this point of no return, this crossroads. So if we go back to the first one, we talk about this idea of partisanship, and that there no longer is any middle ground. We can't get along.
Neither side can understand one another.
We also looked at how someone enters office that shakes up the status quo, and they cause strong emotions on both sides of the aisle, whether for or against. We see that the media paints the picture of this as the most evil person who has ever existed. Everyone is on high alert, wondering what he's going to do next.
If that's not happening today, I don't know what is.
We see it very clearly. But we also know that the person that follows is, according to the cycles of history, the person who follows is always much worse.
Right, and we can call back to our first episode when we delved into 2 Thessalonians. This person was called the wicked.
Capitalized. This happens because once this person is removed, as 2 Thessalonians talks about, the people let their guard down once the election comes, and they're no longer wondering what's going on because in their mind they think we've returned to normalcy.
Right, this bad stage has passed.
I once asked a soldier the question, what is the most dangerous time during a war? I think a lot of people would say, well, when we first get there, when the boots hit the ground. But it was really interesting. This guy said to me, it's the end of the war because we all let our guard down. We start thinking everything's okay. We think the battle is over, and that's when they get us.
That's a good point.
It's dangerous.
It's a counterstrike after that is what happens, right?
And so we see that we let our guard down a little bit, and we no longer are on high alert.
We're no longer vigilant for enemies.
We're not vigilant. Before the crossroads, we also see that there's a complete shift from a balanced focus to a temporal focus.
And I think it's kind of a subtle long-term shift that takes us there, but this crossroads is that utter and total shift to the temporal.
And you see it with the upper and middle class. It's all about the needs and the wants. But with the lower class, it turns to, you owe me this. And it's looking for the promises that the politicians make.
Right.
And that's the next part is we also see that through the Tytler cycle, getting to this crossroads, as soon as elected officials figure out that they can get elected by promising the people more and more things instead of running on their character or running on their honor, we also see that we become to a state of entitlement.
Well, I think yesteryear the focus was on freedom and equal opportunity, freedom of worship, freedom of one's own conscience, as we talked about in the first one. And I think the danger in this is that it shifts from this liberty-loving, freedom-loving focus to a dependency and entitled focus, right?
And the entitled focus on liberty is this is what makes us free, is the promises of the elected officials of give me more stuff.
Right.
And this is where we see freedom transitions into dependency because we elect those who promise us the most material gain.
We become blinded by our temporal focus. We become blinded by those promises, right? We say, we don't care what you do as long as I get X.
And if that is not happening today, you can see all the signs are there. And I think that can be scary for a lot of people. The last step of what we want to look at is looking at the money supply of the people. And because we have this new temporal focus and this dependency from our government, we have to look at what happens to the money supply when we come to this state of our nation.
The state of our temporal focus.
We've seen how the politicians are constantly trying to expand the money supply because they're making all these promises, and so the taxes we've seen can no longer come from tariffs or sales tax. It moves to income tax. We also seen how we can no longer be backed by gold because that restricts the politicians, so we have to go off the gold standard and can't be backed by that. We have to have fractional reserve banking, which is you only have to have a certain amount of gold and silver in the bank. We also look at fiat currency, which is, okay, let's just scrap gold and silver altogether. It doesn't have to be backed by anything, and let's just print money. This is the politicians' best way to create the money for all of their promises.
Right. We talked a lot about this in, I believe, our first episode, partisanship and natural law, right?
I think we talked a little bit about it in the second one as well.
Okay.
So think of it this way. Let's take a rubber band.
Okay.
And the politicians, here's the tricky game they have to play.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a rubber band in my hand, and I'm taking this rubber band and I'm expanding it, expanding it, expanding it, expanding it. What's happening to that rubber band?
Well, it's about to break.
So politicians cannot let this rubber band break, because if it breaks, that causes massive inflation.
Mm-hmm.
And the price of goods and services, they rise to the point of so high that it's harder for the middle and the lower class to afford anything. And so the politicians, they play this game. And so before this rubber band breaks, they have to start contracting the rubber band.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know how they do this?
No, I don't.
In order to do this, they have to raise interest levels.
Okay.
So your car today is what percentage of loan?
Oh, boy. Do we want to talk about my beautiful car? It's like a 3.74%.
Pretty good at interest rate.
Yeah, pretty good.
And so the problem with that is when you have low interest rates, look at the housing market right now. They've lowered the interest rates so much, people are refinancing, they're buying houses, getting bigger houses, and they're able to do this because normally an interest rate are historically not this low. Mm-hmm. This is this is why it's such a dangerous place for our economy and in our nation. Because what happens is the American people start thinking this is normal, that we can do this. And pretty soon, this idea of entitlement and the lower class and the marginalized groups who are saying, well, you owe me, I want, I need, as well, like everybody else when you turn to materialism, they ask themselves, well, why can't we just print more money? Mm-hmm. Well, that's the reason why is we don't want that rubber band to break, because if it breaks, that's what the politicians don't want to happen. Because if it breaks, you have an economic downturn that is so severe that it is going to make it, you have runaway inflation. Runaway inflation is a dangerous thing because you can never get caught up. And what happens is before it breaks, you want to contract, and that's called deflation. Mm-hmm. Nothing creates dependency like debt does. Mm-hmm. Nothing feels worse than being consumed by debt.
Yeah, you feel so bogged down. It's Proverbs 22:7 that says the borrower is slave to the lender, and I don't think it could be put any more aptly.
As you see materialism play out, you see Americans not being able to spend within their means. Savings is at an all-time low in American history. Mm-hmm. People are living paycheck to paycheck more than at any other time. Mm-hmm. But it took a long time for us to get here.
Yeah. It seems like this shift to the materialism that you're talking about, it's all about stuff, and we've thrown out the door the virtues of patience and living within our means, right? Of slowly working towards the savings, slowly working towards having what we need or want.
Well, October 22nd, 1981 was a huge day in American history.
Okay, let's hear about it.
On that day, America reached the $1 trillion debt point. So it took us 205 years to reach the 1 trillion debt mark. Mm-hmm. From 1981 to 2020 to today, we've spent almost $26 trillion, and we are now in debt $26 trillion. In fact, in the past few months, we've spent over $2 trillion because of the pandemic.
That is so crazy, because this gives us an actual tangible number, statistic we can look at and go, wow, here is that shift we're talking about.
Well, the shift to dependency.
Right.
Nothing is worse than a nation that is consumed by debt.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's out of control.
Mm-hmm.
And the politicians are out of control.
Right.
Thomas Jefferson then goes on to say, I place economy first and most important of Republican virtues, and public debt is the greatest to be feared. It is incumbent upon every generation to pay its own debts as it goes.
Mm-hmm.
Through his studies, I think he understood one thing. You're going to have liberty when you're not controlled.
Right, when you're not tied down to these debts. And I think the point that he's making here is when he puts economy before, when he says he puts economy essentially above all, he's talking about the fact that economy is the means to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Economy, or the way that we make our funds, is the way that we support our living. It's the way that we support our property. So what I think Jefferson is saying here is, with economy being the thing he places above all, he's saying the economy really is the means to your life, your liberty, your property, and your pursuit of happiness, right? It's the way that you support your living. It's the way that you are set free, right? When you have control of your own funds, you have nobody that's holding you down. It's the way that you afford your property. It's the way that you can pursue your happiness. It gives you that means to put forth and say, here's my dream, let's walk.
Jefferson knew this was first and foremost the most important aspect of a free nation. You have to live within your means in order for the people at large to be free.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, who controls us? With all this debt, who will control us? And I think there's this idea that it doesn't matter because we are in the dependency state.
Right.
That we can just continue to print and go into more and more debt and with no consequences. I know we talked about this before,
mm-hmm.
but what I think is important is to illustrate how far down the rabbit hole we have gone to this state of being shackled by our own not being able to, as a nation, live within our means, and the people not being able to live within our means.
Yeah, we have so overstepped our bounds.
This is where our freedom is going to disintegrate over time. And this is going to take us to this crossroads, and why we are going to have a crossroads, because you see a lot of this generation, how they are, debt is not even on their mind.
No, not at all.
Or living within their means is not even in their mind.
No, it's kind of becoming all about me, what I want, and I want it now, right?
And that's hard to pigeonhole a generation. All is one. But I think slowly over time you begin to see what happens to a generation with this idea and this thinking that we can just make more money. Yeah. Why isn't the government giving us more of that money?
Yeah.
And that's the cry of today.
Yeah. I heard someone just the other day tell me, dude, money is nothing. We can just print more. Money is nothing, and it's not. According to Jefferson, it's this foundation of a society, right?
Well, it's everything, and it's everything because if you are in control of your money, it seems like you're going to be in control of the other virtues of your life.
Right.
You're going to find more balance of your life. You're just not going to find be in this imbalanced state of materialism or Epicureanism. You're gonna seek to find those other virtues and morals as well.
Well, it creates ownership and sets you free.
The adverse effect is when you lose control of economic responsibility, it takes us to a crossroads, and we're using this word a lot because these first 3 episodes is the crossroads of where we're coming to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it part of that crossroads is a great economic downturn.
Right. And we wanted to be able to illustrate this for you, what happens when you hand over this responsibility to these irresponsible politicians, by going to a chapter in the Bible. We want to go to Isaiah chapter 3 in the King James Version.
For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread, and the whole stay of water. I think we got to look at the word stay. Is that a ship reference?
So yeah, a stay would be a strong, large rope that would hold the mast in place, solidify the mast in place on a ship.
So let's find the definition for staff.
So staff would represent an authority or a title, kind of a place of great honor given to a person.
So if you put that all together, and Jerusalem represents America today, it represents that we're losing our what?
So in essence, God is saying that the nation is losing its foundational strength and its God-given authority, its God-given blessing, that this would be a promised land.
Let's see what else we might be losing. 2. The mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, the captain of 50 and the honorable man and the counselor and the cunning artificer and the eloquent orator. Those are all the people of society that you need to have a stable, fruitful society.
Well, I think it's symbolic of a lot of warriors, heroes, leaders within a nation. God is saying, not only are you losing this foundational strength, not only are you losing this God-given authority, but there's no longer these warriors among you. There's no longer these righteous leaders among you. Those have been taken away because of what you've chosen.
It's that crossroads.
The crossroads, the Rubicon.
They've crossed the Rubicon.
Right.
And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them.
This is exactly what's going on today, right? God's saying, you've lost these things. There's no more righteous leaders. Because of what you've chosen, look what I've put in their place. Children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them.
Well, let's look at... We've talked about before how you have to have this balance, and we've talked within this balance, there's this emotion. And you have adults who are able to control their emotions, and then you have children, they don't control their emotions.
Yeah, they go by the whims of their emotions.
And if you look at politicians on both sides of the aisles as they attack each other, it sounds like two little kids fighting.
Yeah, it's just petty squabbles, right?
It's actually comical when you look at it from this point of view.
Right.
I mean, wasn't there a politician who said, well, I'm going to beat this guy, I'm going to take him out to the woodshed and beat him up, or something to that effect? And
no clue about that.
I mean, but that's where we're going to. That's they're acting like kids and babes.
Well, yeah, and I think each side is hanging on to the other person's words, even if they're these minor Freudian slips that they accidentally said this or that, and they bloat them to be this grandiose thing or this great lie, right? Like, oh, they said this. That means they're going to destroy our side. They're going to kill our nation, right?
I really like your kid voice.
This is my kid voice. Let's go to 5.
And the people shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. This is good.
Yeah, this is... I mean, you look at the parallels of today, right? And the people shall be oppressed, everyone by another, and everyone by his neighbor. That's just the first half of it. Think of all the fear that's out there of each person in their own party, the fear of the other party, right?
If this side wins, it's the end of the world. If this side wins, it's the end of the world.
Right.
Both sides are saying it.
But there's also this great fear of even showing your support for your side, right? Whether this side or that, it's, do I even put out a supporting sign, or do I even put out a comment about this or that? Like, there's this fear, this oppression of, if I don't fit the mold of those who are directly around me, am I going to be attacked, shamed, mistreated, or what be it?
Well, that mob is so loud these days that if you do have the wrong sign out front, that thing is either being destroyed or you're going to be shamed by that. And I think a lot of people have gone into this silent mode of, I don't want to say where I stand anymore.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to, you kind of want to stand in this middle ground or become a recluse so as not to receive any battings or bruisings.
I love how it says, the child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient. The ancient is the wise, the honorable, the one who is deep within these foundational roots.
Right. It goes back to the foundation of our nation, and even before, in these roots of morality, of freedom, of liberty, of truth. And the symbolism of the child is to come in and say, I know better. I know better than thee, right? Who came before I.
Well, how many teenagers do you know that know everything?
How many teenagers are in the world?
A lot.
All of them.
When a man shall take hold of his brother of the house of his father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand.
So I like the symbolism of this one when it says, when a man shall take hold of his brother, and then it specifically says...
Of the house of his father.
Of the house of his father. And so in my mind, it paints this picture of these two siblings, who one strayed from the house of his father and one stayed with the house of his father. And
well, the one who stays is building the heritage, the family heritage.
Right. Stuck with the ancient, right?
Stuck with the ancient. Those who have left are those who they know more.
They're the children.
They're the children
behave
who
proudly.
know more. Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand.
So what I think of with this is it's almost like a casting the blame and the responsibility onto that house, right? You've got all the needs. You have all the answers. You figure it out. It's going to fall to shambles, and it'll be by your hand.
Placing the blame on another.
Right. Never looking within, as we talked about before. Taking ownership.
In 7, in that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be an healer, for in my house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler of the people.
So what I think this is saying in 7 here is that the brother that strayed is basically saying, I'm not the one with the answers, for in my house is neither bread nor clothing. Don't put me in charge of this. You figure it out.
Which is interesting because this crisis comes, but before the crisis, he knew everything. He knew what was best. But then after the crisis, he comes in and says, I don't want this responsibility anymore.
You figure it out.
You figure it out, even though it's the children who caused this crisis.
Right.
8. For Jerusalem is ruined and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eye of his glory. It's a curse upon the nation. It's a broken covenant.
Because they've strayed with their actions and with their word from that which the Lord has given.
They've strayed away from inalienable rights.
Right.
They've strayed away from freedom.
From morality.
They've strayed away from faith. They've strayed away from common sense. They've strayed away from reason. Because of that, the curse falls upon them. It's like the Israel saying, we want a king, we want a king, we want a king, we want to be like all the other nations. That's what these people are doing. They want to be like everybody else, and they stray away from what once made us great, the foundational principles of what made us great. 9. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves.
I feel like this one is saying, it says, the show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. So this is describing how blatantly the politicians have laid forth what it is they want, right? At some point, it might have been more hidden.
A hidden agenda?
Yeah, a hidden agenda, kind of behind the scenes, flowery words, right? Like, yeah, we kind of want to do this, we kind of want to do that, but don't be scared. And today it's become an outright,
this is what we are.
This is what we're after. Here's our face, right?
The declaration of manifesto. The manifesto has been put out in front of everybody.
Yeah.
The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. There's a lot here, so let's break this down a little bit. The show of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom. They hide it not.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what's happening today from the politician and from the people, right? That's in days past, there might be a hidden agenda or the slight push towards these goals that we weren't quite sure of, right? And it was these flowered words of, just a little this way, don't worry about it. But today, it's become outright, here's our plan, right? There are no holds bars, this is what we want.
10. Say ye to the righteous, that it shall be well with him, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. I think with this, it says, all will be well. All is going to be well for those who hold on to the foundation.
Yeah, and I think we can tie it back into the scripture, so
In a time of crisis, you have people who are going to destroy inalienable rights. They will destroy property. They will destroy life. They will destroy liberty. They will destroy the pursuit of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
But the righteous holds that foundation dear. And no matter what is happening during a time of crisis or crises, they will hold on to those rights. They will know that it's within them, that they always will be within them. They will hold on to that life. They will respect the life of others. They will respect their property. They will respect the whole inalienable rights as a whole, and they will be blessed for it.
Yeah, it seems like there's a kind of a good karma that comes with that, or just it attracts that which is good and right when you can hold to this inalienable foundation.
Well, you reap what you sow.
You reap what you sow, and isn't that what it says here? Is for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. Right? When they choose to respect these inalienable rights, these natural laws, and they preserve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, they can't but eat of that same fruit.
Coming to a crossroads is scary, and I like this verse because it says, hey, there is hope.
Yeah, and you should have hope.
It doesn't mean it's the end of society as we know it.
Mm-mm.
There is still hope. And 11 goes on to say, woe unto the wicked, it shall be ill with them, for the reward of his hands shall be given him. Reap what you sow. There's going to come another reaping for them.
Yeah, it's the same token, the other side of the same coin, right?
Well, they always turn against themselves.
Right.
12. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the ways of thy paths. This is what they do, is they tear down, they change the old traditions.
They reverse traditional roles. So I think what this is saying is that in this day, everything's kind of turned on its head. All of our traditional roles, values, beliefs are reversed.
And because you no longer have a foundation, it leads you and causes you to err and destroys your paths.
Yeah.
It destroys the direction of where you were once going.
Because I think to hold to those foundational principles, it opens this beautiful walkway, this beautiful path to life, liberty, creation, this beautiful preservation. And when you go in the opposite direction, it's actually a damning, destructive.
Well, what is a crossroads? Go back to that definition.
So if I go back to the definition, it's a point at which a crucial decision must be made that will have far-reaching consequences.
And this is it. The whole direction of the nation shifts.
Yeah, well, it's flipped on its head in essence.
13. The Lord standeth up to plead, and standeth to judge the people. I love that word plead. The Lord pleading to his people. The righteous, those who still have a piece of that love of freedom, inalienable rights, foundational principles,
right.
Morality.
Who's still there? Who's still there? That's the image I get, right? Who still believes in what I've given?
And that's what crisis does, is this great gathering. The separation comes before, but then after the crisis, the separation is clear.
Mm-hmm.
You know which side you stand on.
Right.
And this is God's pleading of, is there anybody standing on the right side?
Right.
The Lord will enter into judgment with the ancients of his people, and the princes thereof, for ye have eaten up the vineyard, the spoil of the poor is in your houses.
So what I get from this is, it says the Lord will enter into the judgment with the ancients of his people. And I think if you go back to the previous verses, God's coming back with these ancients being these foundational principles, these righteous leaders of the past, and saying, right, when he enters with judgment, you had this standard. You knew what was good and right. What have you done? What have you done with this? And he says, you've eaten up the vineyard. This was this beautiful vineyard of growth, of liberty, of freedom, of passion. You ate it all up. And what do you have instead? You have the spoil of the poor in your house.
Well, look at all of the inventions that have come out of America to bless humanity. Look at those fruits alone. Look at the fruits of prosperity and the ability to go out and help other nations and
Right.
other people.
Right, we've had such abundance and an excess of means, of resources.
Even the poorest of the poor still have things that you would normally not see in other time periods or other nations.
Yeah, even the poorest among us have a kingly estate, right?
15. What mean ye that ye beat my people to pieces and grind their faces of the poor, saith the Lord of hosts?
What have you done?
Because of your greed, because of your unrighteous direction, because you seek for this pride and this self-empowerment, speaking of the leaders, in essence, you have destroyed the weak. You have destroyed the poor. You claim you're going out to helping them, but in reality, you don't care about them. You care about yourself.
You've done nothing but trample on them.
16. Moreover, the Lord saith, because the daughters of Zion are haughty and walk with stretched forth necks and wanton eyes, walking and mincing as they go, and making a tinkling with their feet.
What kind of imagery does that give to you?
So I see in my mind, I see the way a father treats his daughters.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot different than the way a father treats his son,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion.
Okay.
Because daughters, man, they can do a lot that can get there to have that father's anger wash away pretty quickly. Whether it's a smile or coming up and saying, I'm sorry, Daddy.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot different.
Right.
It looks a lot different.
That's why they call them daddy's girls, that kind of situation, right?
And so you're going to be a little easier on your daughters
Mm.
than you would be on your son. And so I think this is God saying, here you were, this coveted nation where everybody wanted to come to. And look at what you have become. You have become almost an embarrassment because of your squabbling
Mhm.
and because of your inability to coexist in the party system. No. Because of your squabbling and
your entitled inability to appreciate that which you have.
Yeah, and you look at, you don't appreciate what you have had or what you have or the great blessings in your life. You're constantly looking at
You have the outstretched neck, right? I'm looking for something else.
something different, something
Mhm.
new. Those wanton eyes.
Mhm.
You know, your eyes get big. You hear something new and somebody captures you
Mhm.
to follow a different path. And they're mincing as they go, making it tinkling with their feet. Like there's a, it's almost like, maybe you're not doing the right thing, but it's kind of exciting because you're rebelling a little bit
Yeah.
against the old order.
Yeah.
And you kind of like it.
Mhm.
But you don't comprehend the repercussions of what is going to come because of your
actions.
tinkling feet.
Right.
17. Therefore the Lord will smite with a scab the crown of the head of the daughters of Zion, and the Lord will discover their secret parts. The curse will come. It's a part of society. It almost helps wake people up.
Yeah. With this, I almost get that God for so long has allowed the nation to have its flaws, its mistakes, trip, stumble, go this way and that. And I think it's when it's saying that he will discover their secret parts, I think it's saying this realization of, wow, you've become a monster.
Well, we know that America is not perfect.
Right.
We know it has at times a terrible past.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what we focus on. We look for a greater tomorrow. We look for a brighter future. We look for the hope of that future.
Right.
It's come a long ways from where it has been at times. There's still a lot of room to grow and a lot of things to work on.
Right. And I think the thing is, the best thing to do when you're trying to fix a problem is not to focus on the thing that's going wrong, but instead to help the thing go right.
And here we come full circle. Well, what does God do? What does God do to these people? 18. In that day the Lord will take away the bravery of their tinkling ornaments about their feet, and their calls and their round tires like the moon. Now it begins to shift where God starts, okay, the curse must come, and I've got to take away the materialism of the people.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, from dependency and this materialistic ideas, through the lens of history, as we go back, and as we see in the Tytler cycle, from dependency, we always go back. From dependency, we go to bondage, but then to bondage when things are taken away from us, materialistic wants are gone. We tend to always go back to that spiritual faith because we have to have that. The human being, just as it needs to blame someone or something, there's also that other side of the human being where it has to have hope that it's put itself in this mess, but if I have hope, I can get myself out of this somehow, some way. And he goes on. He's going to keep on taking away. This materialism is going to be taken away. The chains and the bracelets and the mufflers, the bonnets and the ornaments of the legs, and the headbands and the tablets and the earrings, the rings and the nose jewels, the changeable suits of apparel and the mantles and the wimples and the crisping pins, the glasses of the fine linen, the hoods and the veils. Isn't it that hit everything? Like there is a representation, a symbolism in there for every single material.
Right. You've been spoiled.
Want.
You've been spoiled and you've lost your privileges, right?
And what does that look like when people lose everything? It changes the mindset.
Oh, very quickly.
That's a crossroads.
Yeah.
And it shall come to pass that instead of sweet smell, there shall be stink. And instead of a girdle, a rent. And instead of a well-set hair, baldness. And instead of a stomacher, a girding of sackcloth and burning instead of beauty. You look at somebody who has undergone a transformation in their life because of all this material goods.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean that's this beauty, this outward beauty. That's the way the way we look at things in our society today. It's this new outward beauty of that's what's important to us, and that's what we put on a pedestal.
Right.
And that's why even though some people don't have a lot of common sense necessarily, we put them on this pedestal because they look good.
Right.
Because they have those stomachers on.
Right. And I think what this is saying is, hey, we're getting rid of this. You're going to go through some fire a little bit, and it's going to bring you back.
25. Thy men shall fall by the sword, and thy mighty in the war. And her gate shall lament and mourn, and she being desolate shall sit upon the ground. I don't think anybody is better at capturing a mental picture than Isaiah, because as you look at her, who?
The daughter of Zion, right?
The people sitting on the ground.
This is God's way of saying you're being brought low, you're being made humble, you're being made to turn back.
You've had your little revolution. You've changed the whole dynamic of what America once was.
Mm-hmm.
I let you do that.
Mm-hmm.
I gave you the freedom to do that because that's in essence what America is the freedom and the allowance to do those things. But now where are you?
Where
are
dust.
you? You're in the dust.
Sit down. Right? Sit down.
A lot of people will look at this or Isaiah portrays it, will look at this economic downturn as a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a bad thing. I think it's a moment in our time within the crossroads to help us understand where we're at, almost like an awakening within the individual. We talked about the individual, how important it is for the individual to at some point wake up within themselves and to see what's happening around them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a wake-up call.
Right.
It's not a bad thing. It's just a wake-up call.
Well, it's part of the cycle of history, right?
This is what really gets people's attention, because if you place economy first and foremost, as Jefferson says in a republic, this is what gets people's attention, is when that economy starts faltering.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to Jefferson, he's the one who explains to us how this economic downfall comes to pass. Let's read another quote by him.
Okay.
If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. In 1913, when we generated the income tax, we also incorporated the Federal Reserve, the bank became private.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what Jefferson says. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, and then he goes on to say, so here we have the Federal Reserve, which is not federal, it's a private bank.
Right.
First by inflation. So inflation is the increase in the amount of money that you're putting into the economic system in America. You increase the money supply. And so you put more and more money into the banks that lend out to the people. And the more dollars you put out, the more inflation you're going to have. It's like when you have something that's so rare, like a moon rock, for example. How much do you think a moon rock is going for these days? They're so rare that it's got to be, I don't know.
It's got to be high up there. I have no clue.
I bet you're paying $1 million for a moon rock.
Yeah, I bet. Easy.
Well, let's say that Elon Musk creates his little spaceship that's able to go up to the moon every day, and people are just bringing up pounds and pounds of moon rocks back to the Earth, and soon you have
a greater supply than demand, right?
You got a greater supply than demand, and you have all these moon rocks, and then you have kids selling them on the side of the street. Instead of lemonade, they're selling these moon rocks. That price is going to go down from $1 million because it has been increased. It's going to go down to $50 for a moon rock.
Right.
Because you're going to have so many of them.
Right.
Well, this is what happens in inflation. With inflation is you increase that money supply. And so Jefferson says, first by inflation. How do you increase that money supply through inflation? You lower the interest rates. You make money more accessible to people, which is going to cause inflation.
Right.
Well, you can never hit hyperinflation because then the prices overnight, like the Weimar Republic, the prices are rising at such a rapid rate because of inflation that it's just run away on you. The money chain has run away on you, and you can't get it back. It's hard to get back without some huge repercussion. And so the politicians know this. And so Jefferson said, first by inflation and then by deflation. Well, how do you cause deflation is make it harder for money. You start taking money out of the economy, and that starts contracting. And then you also want to raise interest rates. I look at interest rates; they're at an all-time low.
Right.
Some people think because of the state of the economy, they're going to hit negative interest rates, where the banks will lose money by lending out. They're not making much money now, but more and more people they're excited about what's happening. This is just a consequence of what is going on in our economic system. This pandemic didn't cause what's coming, the economic depression. What it did was it laid bare our economic state, because you noticed not many businesses had savings. So many businesses have gone under. And even with all the government help and the government money, they couldn't print enough to sustain us during that time. And so eventually this is going to catch up with us. It's just going to show how bad the economic state was, because you can't have this much debt and get away with it.
Right.
It's going to catch up with you. This just happened to take a pandemic to expose where we're truly at. And so Jefferson, going back to his quote, the private banks first inflate because they want to make the politicians need to keep all their promises, and it just pushed us further into dependency. But then when they get in trouble, they have to deflate.
So it's kind of this fine balance, this fine dance of stretching it to its limit and then letting it go, right? You never want to go past that limit.
If it goes past that limit, it's even going to be worse. I don't think the politicians are stupid enough to allow that to happen. We hope, because then the people get upset.
Right.
It's bad enough during depression.
Right.
But when that happens, the people, nobody's happy, especially when you've based your life. Your life is contingent on that materialism. And it's out of balance. And that's been your focus your whole life. So when that goes, you've got nothing left except to say, oh no, what now? What do I do now? We lose sight of those precious things in life at times.
Yeah.
When we're out of balance, especially with the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional.
Right.
When this happens, when this depression comes, it's always part of the cycles of history. When this comes, it kind of changes the idea of what the American dream is. You know, dreams are a funny thing. We don't always remember them when we wake up.
Mm-hmm.
But when we do, we often desire to look for meaning and wonder within them. Or what are these dreams trying to tell us? Maybe it's a sign of something to come in our lives, something portending the future. But in America, we're never supposed to stop dreaming because it's a land of dreams. It's the American dream. It's why so many immigrants have come over to look for to try their hand at the American experiment. With those dreams, anything is possible. The idea that the future, anything is possible, but if you're out of sync with your life and you don't understand what's coming, that American dream is soon going to become a nightmare. And that's why we're doing these podcasts, is to give a little knowledge that we can help people understand what to look forward to. Not look at it as such a bad thing, but look at something that's going to help them to rebalance their lives.
Yeah, because we are on a precipice of such great change in this nation.
And part of that change is freedom is spreading unevenly across America. And that's what debt and materialism does. Economics is apolitical. Each side tries to use it for their benefit, but it's apolitical. It doesn't care about who you are.
No.
It doesn't care about what party you're in. It's going to eventually catch up with you. You can't spend this amount of money and be in this amount of debt and not have consequences. If you always take it back to an individual family, and them being in this amount of debt and spending this amount of money, what's going to happen to them?
That's going to crush them. It's not something that can be swept under the rug.
And as this freedom moves unevenly across America, where does that freedom go to? It's going to spread unevenly to the top, promising to the bottom, and you're going to destroy the middle class.
It's polarizing.
But if you know what's coming, there's a place of peace and a place of hope. And I think that's what we always have to remember. This isn't to scare people. It's to help people to find a little hope in their lives.
Because when you understand these patterns that we're setting forth, it really does give you an idea of what's to come and the hope of a brighter future to come.
And that's going back to the dreaming, is this dreaming state of hope and desires and the ability to have those inalienable rights secured within you.
Yeah, and the hope that your purpose is not done away with.
This is what a crossroads is. It's an awakening. You can still change the direction of your history, your heritage.
As an individual?
As an individual, as groups of individuals coming together to try to protect those liberties.
And
because
communities.
And communities trying to understand what is being lost and how it's being taken away. But this will be in conjunction with the great election crisis that is coming, the economic downturn, and it's going to be a scary time for a lot of people.
Yeah. But
knowing those things are coming, it's going to help us to have that faith to move forward and to continue to wake up and have a little hope that the world is moving in a different direction. Now at Crossroads, it can move to a better tomorrow, or as we're going to show in later episodes, we're going to move to the next 3 episodes. We're going to be talking about tipping points where it will be too late, but we haven't reached that yet. This election crisis that's coming and this economic downturn that's coming, it doesn't mean it's the end of us.
Right.
And it's not the end of America. But it is a wake-up call to say the tipping point is coming.
There has to be a great awakening in the people to keep us from going over that ledge.
Well, the tipping point is when the people go over that ledge. So we're going to show what that looks like and what happens after an election crisis. What are the steps of losing more and more freedoms and what's going to happen? And so you have to really, it has to be a time of introspective,
self-reflection,
self-thinking of who do I want to be and where do I want my family to be tomorrow?
What do I stand for?
It's going to be an awesome time for people to reflect on those things.
We have a lot coming in just a handful of weeks. In these few short weeks, we could live in an entirely different world.
Well, that's what a crossroads is.
Absolutely.
It looks like an entirely different world. But it prepares us for the tipping point. And that's why the next 3 episodes, we're going to really focus on what that tipping point looks like.
Thank you all for listening to these first 3 episodes of our podcast.
These 3 episodes have been on the coming crossroads, which includes an election crisis and an economic downturn. We will now start a new series called Tipping Points, which will show what the next patterns of history have in store for us. Please contact us if you have any questions at threadinghistory@gmail.com. That's threadinghistory@gmail.com. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you.